Welcome to Theology Explained for Beginners. Our new topic is prayer. This is already part 3. Part 1 of prayer talk about introduction. Part 2 of prayer discuss grades 1 to 4, the ascetical prayers. Part 3, we will be discussing grades 5 to 9, also known as the mystical prayers. So let's begin. My reference comes from Spiritual Theology, authored by Jordan Oman, OP. In part 1 of prayer, you were introduced with the 9 grades of prayer by Saint Avila. Now, the 9 grades of prayer, we have a vocal, which is the most basic form of prayer, and then followed by meditation, then affective prayer, and then prayer of simplicity. These 4 are called ascetical prayers. Then you have number 5, grade 5, the infused contemplation, and then prayer of the quiet, number 6, grade 6. Grade 7 is prayer of union. Grade 8 is prayer of conforming union, and then grade 9 is prayer of transforming union. So from grades 5 to 9, they are called mystical prayer. Our lecture will focus on the mystical prayer, grades 5 to 9. Now also in part 1, we also showed the diagram of how the sequence from vocal prayer reaches the prayer of simplicity. Now, in the mystical prayers, grade 5 to 9, will follow from prayers of simplicity, and so we have grades 5 to 9, the mystical prayers. So for grades 5 to 9, let us mention the characteristics of, as a group, these mystical prayers. They are infused by God, and they are not human effort. So we must remember this. If grades 5 to 9, the mystical prayers, they are infused by God and not human effort. Also, they are built on a relationship, and it cannot be acquired by method. It cannot be learned by method. So it is built on a relationship with God. Number 3, there should be an interior transformation of the one who is praying, and not exterior transformation. It should be interior transformation. Number 4, in mystical prayer, there should be a desire and love for God. There should be a great desire and love for God. And this takes over the person. Number 5, sin has no hold on the person. If the person is already in the mystical prayer, sin has no hold on that person anymore. Number 6, these prayers are never forced. So we must remember that to differentiate these from other prayers, these prayers are never forced. Now, let's go now to the first mystical prayer, grade 5, It is called infused contemplation. Prayer of infused contemplation, a surest sign of true contemplation, is that the soul often leads this prayer with a great impulse towards a virtuous life. Sometimes the soul may be given a degree of progress in a certain virtue which has been impossible to attain despite great efforts. During this short or long period of time, individuals in varying degrees begin to be infused with God's own supernatural knowledge, wisdom, understanding, insight, love, joy, strength, etc., beyond description. Infused contemplation principally affects the intellect, which is withdrawn from the other faculties. So let's remember that in grade 5, it affects the intellect. Number 1, God gives to the soul a deep intellectual and experimental taste of His presence, and even gifts, etc., which cannot be depicted clearly and distinctively. Number 2, the soul feels it is being permeated with something it cannot describe, like an invasion by the supernatural. 3, the soul is aware that it is impossible to produce the mystical experience by one's effort. Now let's go to grade 6, the prayer of the quiet. In the prayer of the quiet, the will is totally captivated by divine love, the awareness of God's presence, and also the soul is filled with sweetness and joy. Sometimes all the faculties are captivated and the person experiences ecstasy. The prayer of quiet is a type of mystical prayer in which the intimate awareness of God's presence captivates the will and fills the soul and body with ineffable sweetness and delight. The prayer of the quiet especially affects the will, although the intellect and the memory are now tranquil. They still remain free to realize what is occurring, but the will is completely captivated and absorbed in God. For that reason, the prayer of quiet, as its name indicates, tend to contemplative silence and repose. Since the other faculties remain free, however, they can be occupied with the work of the active life, and they may do so with great intensity. In the prayer of the quiet, there is also what they call concomitant phenomena. So what is this concomitant phenomena? Concomitant phenomena. Number 1, sleep of the faculties. The soul is almost dead to the things of the world and enjoying God alone. Number 2, inebriation. The love of God is so intense that it cannot be contained but must burst forth into the external, leaps of joy and cries of love. Norms of conduct present in the prayer of the quiet. Number 1, it is never force oneself. Number 2, cooperate with the divine movement. Number 3, do not disturb the quiet of the will. Number 4, avoid any occasion of offending God. So these four are the norms of conduct in the prayer of the quiet. Never force oneself, cooperate with the divine movement, do not disturb the quiet of the will, avoid any occasion of offending God. Grade 7, Prayer of Union. Here, both the intellect and the will are absorbed, captivated, and occupied with God. The prayer of union is that grade of mystical prayer in which all the internal faculties are gradually captivated and occupied with God. In the prayer of union, all the interior faculties, including memory and imagination, are captivated. All the interior faculties of the soul are centered of God alone. Only the external senses are still free. The intensity of the mystical experience in prayer of union caused by the prayer of union is indescribable. It is superior beyond compare to that of the preceding grade, to the point that the body itself is affected by the working of God in the soul. Without being entirely captivated, the external senses become almost helpless and inoperative. The soul experiences divine reality with such intensity that it could easily fall into ecstasy, around 30 minutes to several hours. According to Saint Teresa of Avila, they are generically the same prayer. The difference lies in the intensity of God's grace, through which God initiates, continues, and unites the soul ever more completely to Himself. The soul is so anxious to praise God that it would gradually die 1,000 deaths for His sake. It has an intense longing to suffer great trials and experience vehement desires for penance and solitude. It wishes that all souls would know God, and it is greatly saddened when it sees God is offended. The soul is dissatisfied with everything that it sees on earth, since God has given it wings so that it can fly to Him. Let's go now to the signs of prayer of union. Number 1, absence of distractions. Number 2, there is a certitude of being intimately united with God. 3, absence of weariness and never experiences any fatigue in prayer. 4, does not harm the individual. While praying for long hours, it does not harm the individual. There is also concomitant phenomena in prayer of the union. And what are these concomitant phenomena in the prayer of the union? Number 1, mystical touches. Gives the soul a sense of sensation of having been touched by God Himself. Number 2, flights of the Spirit. This leaves the soul with a consuming thirst for God. Number 3, fiery darts of love. This pierces the soul, arouses a profound desire for God, and a kind of hatred for the body. We are now grade 8, the prayer of conforming union. Also called prayer of ecstatic union, the mystical espousal or conforming union. Here, the soul is centered on God alone. This is the mystical espousal or conforming union. God captivates even the external senses, with the result that the soul is totally divinized, so to speak, and to prepare and prepared by God to move to the full and final commitment of transforming union. In prayer of conforming union, there is ecstatic experience of conforming union. The soul not only has contact with God in the very center of its soul, but also it seems to peer into the very essence of God and discover divine secrets. The essential element in this prayer, however, is the absorption of the soul in God. The ecstasy is a secondary but concomitant element. Both of these elements are necessary for the true mystical ecstasy. The soul feels as if it has been in another world. The last grade, grade 9, prayer of transforming union. Also called mystical marriage or spiritual marriage because it is the most intimate union of the soul with God that is possible in this life. Also called mystical marriage or spiritual marriage because it is the most intimate union of the soul with God that is possible in this life. The last grade of prayer is the transforming union. It is the highest degree of perfection that one can attain in this life. It is therefore a prelude to the beatific life of glory in heaven. Here, there is transformation of the soul into its beloved. In this grade of prayer, there is a total transformation of the soul into the beloved. The soul has entered into its very center, so to speak, which is the throne room of the interior castle where the Trinity dwells through grace. There, God and the soul give themselves to each other in the consummation of divine love, so far as it is possible in the present life. There is no more ecstasy in this last grade, for the soul has now been strengthened to receive the full power of love, but in the brightness of an intellectual vision. The soul experiences the Trinity with vivid awareness. The signs present in transforming union: number one, the soul becomes brilliant and is transformed in God. Number two, God communicates His supernatural being to the extent the soul appears divine and have all that God has. There is perfect communication and mutual gift of self. Union is also permanent. What are the effects of transforming union? The highest grade, grade 9. Number one, complete forgetfulness of self. Number two, has a great desire to suffer. Number three, it feels joy in persecution. Four, strong desire to serve God and help any soul it can. Five, detachment from everything created. So in part one of our lecture in prayer, I showed you this diagram to show the movement of prayer from vocal all the way up to grade 9. We also mentioned that in vocal prayer, it is our senses that we offer up to God in our prayer. In meditation, it is our intellect that we offer up to God in our prayer. When we get to affective prayer, it is our will that we offer up to God during prayer. And in the prayer of simplicity, our whole self is the one that we offer up to God. Now, it's also worth for us to remember that these first four grades of prayer, which are the ascetical prayers, are purely human effort. Now, when we get to the next level, grade 5 to 9, we are entering the mystical level, where God is the one working. He is helping the soul reach the high levels of the grade 5 to 9. Now, according to Father Oman, in grade 5, God takes hold of the intellect. By when we reach grade 6, God takes hold of our will. In grade 7, God takes hold of the interior faculties such as intellect, will, including memory and imagination. In grade 8, the soul is totally divinized. Both interior and exterior faculties are taken hold by God. And finally, in grade 9, the person is already transformed in God. Now, our observation here is that what we offer in meditation, in our prayer, when we reach grade 5, that is the one that God takes hold. And in effective prayer, since we offer up our will to God, God takes hold of that in grade 6. We now reach our last slide, wherein we have already offered ourselves in prayer of simplicity. By grade 7, uh, God takes hold of our entire interior faculties, the intellect, the will, the imagination, even memory. God takes hold of that in grade 7. That ends our topic in prayer part 3. If you are looking for other subjects and topics about theology, kindly visit our YouTube channel, Theology Explained for Beginners. Thank you very much.